Okay, so thank you again. Creation of identities in literature. This presentation is oriented towards my proposal of reflecting on the processes of identity creation in literature. It's worth to mention that when I speak, when I pronounce literature, what I am particularly referring is to the one that is written by or about Black communities, mainly in the Americas and specifically in Latin America. I wrote, and I'll plan to continue writing in Spanish, and I enunciate myself from Spanish. And then I also write in English. So what I do is translate from Spanish to English my short stories, because the thought process that I carry on my creative process is in the native language, but also when I try to think in English, I create not a translation version of the original story, but a new version in other language, because each language has their own cultural process and background, and you have to move in that context. So how do I create or propose multiple identities in my literature creation processes? I write short stories, as I mentioned to you, and short stories, also long ones. And here in the IAC Research Symposium, I bring the experience of being selected this semester as a fellow, and thank you for that, and from the Institute of Applied Creativity. And I applied with my proposal of creation with the short stories of my collection of short stories that I have. And my proposal surely has some difference with respect to the one that my colleagues has. And if we consider particularly the field in which I operate, in which I move, writing literature, the way that I do will not result in 3D modeling or a website or a pictorial work in paint. But it's not because the literature can't do that. It is because I am not someone who knows how to model in 3D or how to create websites, because the literature allows you to do that. And this is the most important thing, that when I propose an identity, when I propose an idea or identity, the people who read that is able to recreate, is able to reconnect with that, to criticize that, to read that, and to propose something else based on the tools that the person has. So my process is to think from bias, from prejudice, from stereotypes. Yes, I build what I tell from the assumption of racist, classist, sexist, heteronormative, hegemonic white society, and I add other elements that constitute the intersectionality that serves as a paradigm and a frame of reference with which the Afro-descendant subject is read. How so? Of course, the stories I propose are those that have parameters of the expectation of the society that racialize people as a mechanism for reading individuals. So I take the stereotypes ideas that you, when I say you, I refer to an abstract society. The society has, and use this kind of pre-reads to stereotypes, to bias, to create stories, to create characters, to create identities. And when the magic process starts, when I invert the values, when I change what you, again, you as an abstract society, are expecting from the person, from the character. So that's why that's what I am in creative process of identities in literature, a creator of stereotyped stories that invert values, not from a personal whim, but from the inclusion of experiences of subordinated people, marginalized voices, which narrate highly the fractures produced by these forms of reading and, above all, expose the reader to a situation in which he or she finds the need to question the parameters with which she or his interpreted human behavior. I will make a very brief reference to my proposal, Negro tenía que ser. But before of that, I want to say that in my creative process, the creation of Afro-descendant subject is crossed by personal experience. I mentioned at the beginning, but not only my personal experience, is the personal experience of a lot of Black people, and also a lot of diverse people, and also a lot of indigenous people. So I try to give a voice to the subordinated people, to that person who has no chance to refer themselves from literature. I mean, because literature also is a place from the power. So I have the power to say something, and I use that power, and I want to use that power. So first is that, but then becomes the process and related exactly with writing literature. So I used to call that carpentry. So I have to correct the stories, try to see that everything works well, modifying, reading again and again, and I have to find some people who can read. And this is one of the process that I have been having here in this fellowship, because we have meetings each bi-weekly, and we need to find a way to share or progress. And sometimes I have as a progress a better develop of an idea that I had the last week. So it's different than show you progress with other fields, because in literature everything could be in constant building and construction. So that happens to me. Negro tenía que ser had to be Black is my literature, or my literary project that aims to be a collection of stories in which I will expose what I have just mentioned, taking fiction as a device that makes possible reflection on reality. So Negro tenía que ser, have to be Black, was born about 4 years ago, and it's the last phase of creation, the one in which I review the details that I mentioned to you, that each story narrates. I just story, retouch the characters, and check that the narrative year is still working and functional. Have to do a double check of everything just to see that the first thing that I present at the beginning of the short story works at the end. Because sometimes when you just continue writing, you forget something that you mentioned at the beginning, and some character that you put in some place suddenly disappear. So I have to be able to do that kind of double check. Yeah, so this collection was written, or have been written in Spanish, but since I arrived here to the US and last year in January in 2021, I decided to incorporate English in this process as a language possible to my literature creation. Thus, to exist collection of stories, I have been adding a series of translated version that, as I mentioned to you, so I have discovered respond to different narratives characteristics from the language in which they are enunciated. So if I had a person who went to any place in Colombia at the beginning, or any place to, I don't know, Argentina, Ecuador, now here in the US, I try to move that person from Texas to New York, from California to, I don't know, Massachusetts, just trying to create a new field for the story, because some BS works in other contexts, in other communities, in other cultural background. And this is something that I am enjoying a lot since I arrived here to the US. It's absolutely fantastic to see how some ideas works, continue working. And suddenly are ideas related with discrimination, but they still work. So this is a new phase of the process. Um, and also I have to mention that in this new process have been really important the rhythm. I have been writing with music from the United States, and this has allowed me to have other rhythm than the one that I had before to arrive here. So as a person who writes, I feel that the reading of the daily life and the reading of the music and the reading of the city shows something like the reading of the stories that I'm writing. And this is something that is happening here with the story that I'm writing right now. So more than translation, what I have found in this phase of the creating process is that I'm recreating my stories from idiomatic paradigms different than the one that I have at the beginning. And I am to have the Spanish version complete by the fall of 2022, just in some months. It's just in the last phase, so I hope to complete that as soon as I can. And in the English version, I plan to have complete that for the summer of 2023 or before of that, with a lot of luck. And I don't want to take more time from the next presenter. So mostly that's the idea that I want to share with you about my process with this creation literature in the identities and literature in Black communities, particularly with Negro Tenía Que Ser. So thank you for listening.